So Camille's discussion of swag and masculinity has made me feel really self-conscious and inferior standing up here. But I'll try to cope with it. Okay, so I might just stand here now that I'm here, and then I can look at my slides. So I want to first just thank Nomi and Ariella and Hillary for organizing this great panel and including me on it, and my co-panelists, Camille and Kim and Melissa, and our moderator, Sandy, for being part of this discussion, and also Professor Rick Banks, mostly for giving me the opportunity to comment on this book. So Professor Banks shows that marriage remains an ideal in American life, as both Kim and Camille's comments have suggested. And there's a number, actually, of recent scholarly contributions that make clear that marriage continues to occupy a central position in policy and legal discussions, as well as in individuals' own personal assessments. Nancy Polikoff has persuasively demonstrated that both the same-sex marriage movement and the anti-same-sex marriage movement have something in common. They think of marriage as the central institution through which people should have interpersonal commitment and do child-rearing exercises. Naomi Kahn and June Carbone have shown that in red America, even as marriage rates dip, non-marital childbirth increases and divorce rates remain high, communities continue to structure themselves around the ideal of marriage. And even in blue America, where the normative significance of marriage has been downplayed for a more pluralistic vision of sexual and family life, marriage rates are high and divorce rates actually are quite low, showing that even if not celebrated as social policy, marriage remains a private ideal. And I see Professor Banks contributing to this literature on the role of marriage by arguing that, at least for the women to whom he speaks, higher income, highly educated African American women, they continue to aspire to marriage and desire marriage, even as they marry in very low rates relative to other groups. Indeed, Banks' book suggests even as African Americans generally have low marriage rates, high rates of non-marital childbirth, and high rates of divorce, marriage remains a significant social institution. It retains its status as the proper and most significant location for sexual relationships and for child rearing. So Banks joins scholars like Kahn and Carbone in showing that even as marriage declines, its idealized status continues. And so I read the book thinking, what are we to make of this relationship? Why do people who don't marry want marriage so badly? And why do those who get married and don't stay married still value marriage so much? And realizing what my role is partly in this discussion, I wanted to view some of this through the lens of the same-sex marriage debate, particularly asking why those who largely can't get married value marriage so much and why the movement has made marriage a central priority. So I'm going to draw on some data from my former colleagues at the Williams Institute about the lesbian, gay, bisexual, what I'll call LGB population. We have very limited data, partly because a lot of this is from Census 2000, which only allows us to count same-sex couples and not individuals. And also because marriage is quite recent, we only have data from Massachusetts about who's marrying. I rely on some data from the California Health Interview Survey and the Tobacco Survey, which does allow us to count individuals. But we don't yet have data from Census 2010, at least on the things that I'm talking about here. So the conclusions I'm drawing have to be tentative. Okay, so LGB individuals report some of the same reasons for wanting to marry as straight individuals. We see this from surveys of Massachusetts married same-sex couples. They list love and commitment and legal recognition as the most significant reasons, and we also see children and financial reasons as quite high on the list as well. And so because Professor Banks focuses on racial demographics and the impact of race on the marriage market, I wanted to look at the racial demographics of the LGB population and then map that onto marriage. In California, the LGB population is more white than the general population. And partly this is because what we're measuring is outness. Non-white LGBs are much more likely to be raising children in California than their white counterparts. So you see Latinos, for example, make up 25% of California's same-sex couple population, but 53% of California parents in same-sex couples. Black LGBs and black same-sex couples are more likely to be raising children, and they're doing so with less financial resources than both their different sex counterparts and their same-sex counterparts. 55% of black women in same-sex couples are raising children in California. 39% of all lesbian and bisexual women, black women, are raising children. And that's compared to only 25% of the general lesbian and bisexual female population. Okay, moving outside of California, you see that African-American same-sex couples are most concentrated in areas of the country with greater African-American populations. The more blue the area, the higher the concentration of African-American same-sex couples. This is Census 2000 data. These are also areas of the country with no marriage or relationship recognition for same-sex couples. The same-sex couples most likely to be raising children also tend to live in areas of the country lacking marriage or relationship recognition. So the more purple the area on the map, this is a county-by-county map, the higher the concentration of same-sex couples raising children relative to the whole same-sex couple population. So you can see San Francisco, LA, New York are not deep purple on this map. In fact, the county with the highest percentage of same-sex couples raising children is actually a county in Mississippi. Nationwide, African-American LGBs are much more likely to be raising children than their white counterparts. 51% of African-American women in same-sex couples and 28% of African-American men nationwide are raising children, compared to only 20% and 6% for white women and white men. Crucially, the majority of these children that are being raised by the same-sex couples are from previous heterosexual relationships. Okay, so what do we make of this? Well, many suggest that marriage furnishes the answer. So the Williams Institute, which produces a lot of this data and with which I'm affiliated, concludes one report saying that data from Census 2000 demonstrate that there are many black same-sex couples and families with children in California. Without the support and protection provided by marriage, they're more vulnerable than other California families. So marriage is the solution. But in light of Banks's provocative question, we might ask, is same-sex marriage for white people? And if so, what would that tell us about marriage as the legal and policy solution for same-sex couples and their children? So again, we have very limited data. But we see that same-sex couples in Massachusetts who married are more female, 61%, more white, 91%, older and have higher levels of education and income, 85% with a college degree or higher, that's astronomical, and 52% with a household income over $110,000. So in California, we don't have marriage and we don't have data on who got married in the window, but we have domestic partnership data. So here is female same-sex couples. The registration data here tracks what we saw in Massachusetts generally. The left column are individuals in cohabiting same-sex relationships who aren't registered as domestic partners. The right column, same-sex cohabiting relationships registered as domestic partners. For women, only 1.5% of individuals in registered domestic partners are black, whereas 14.5% of cohabiting non-registered partnerships are black. And you'll note I noted that close to 15% of the population that says they're in a partnership that's non-cohabiting are actually also black. For men, those in registered domestic partnerships are less likely to be raising children. This is the bottom number down here. So that leads to the question of, can we expect marriage to do what we think it's going to do? Marriage and relationship recognition may help the educated, white, upper-income same-sex couple who together deliberately decide to start a family, able to bear the high costs of reproductive technology or adoption. These couples are the most likely to formalize their relationships and take advantage of the rights and benefits of marriage. Same-sex couples who bring children into subsequent same-sex relationships in which both partners are now raising the children may be much less likely to formalize their relationships. At this point, we just don't know. We can't reach firm conclusions, but the limited data we have at least suggests that the rates of marriage or registration aren't correlating positively with child rearing, and that racial minorities are marrying at lower rates than white LGBs. So if the most vulnerable same-sex couples, those raising children with scarce financial resources, don't marry, marriage for same-sex couples might not be capable of doing the work that people, both constituents and advocates, are expecting it to do. We might simply be shoring up the cultural significance of marriage without actually helping actual people and their families on the ground. So I think that leads nicely to the last set of comments from Professor Murray. Thanks.